The cursed tattoo. It was a rainy evening when Jack stumbled upon the strange tattoo shop nestled in a dark alley. He had been wandering the streets aimlessly, trying to shake off the melancholic cloud that had followed him since his recent breakup. The shop, called Eternal Ink, seemed to appear out of nowhere, its flickering neon sign casting eerie shadows on the wet pavement. Jack felt an inexplicable pull toward the place and decided to go in. Inside, the shop was dimly lit, with walls adorned with hauntingly beautiful designs. Skulls, serpents, and strange symbols seemed to come alive under the flickering lights. Behind the counter stood a tall, gaunt man with piercing green eyes. "Welcome," he said in a voice that sent a chill down Jack's spine. "I'm Malachi. What brings you here tonight?" Jack, feeling a mix of curiosity and trepidation, explained that he was looking for something unique, something that would help him move on from his past. Malachi nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. "I have just the thing," he said, retrieving a dusty, leather-bound book from beneath the counter. He flipped through its pages until he found an intricate design of a beastly creature intertwined with arcane symbols. "This tattoo," Malachi said, "is very special. It will give you strength and courage, a fresh start." Without hesitation, Jack agreed. He needed a change, something to make him feel alive again. As Malachi began the tattoo, Jack felt a strange sensation, as if the ink was seeping into his very soul. The pain was intense, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. When the tattoo was finished, Jack looked at his arm in awe. The beastly creature seemed almost to move under his skin, its eyes glinting with a malevolent intelligence. "Take care of it," Malachi warned. "It has a life of its own." Jack shrugged off the warning, too mesmerized by the intricate artwork to take it seriously. Over the next few days, Jack noticed subtle changes. The tattoo seemed to shift slightly, the creature's eyes following his every move. He also began to feel different, stronger, more confident. But with this newfound strength came an unsettling darkness. He found himself having violent thoughts, urges he struggled to control. One night, Jack woke up in a cold sweat. His arm burned where the tattoo was, and he felt an overwhelming compulsion to leave his apartment. He found himself walking through the city streets, guided by some unseen force. It led him to a bar where he got into a fight with a stranger, the violence pouring out of him in a way that terrified him. As the days passed, the tattoo's transformation became more pronounced. The beastly design grew more grotesque, its claws extending, its eyes blazing with a sinister glow. Jack's thoughts were no longer his own, the creature seemed to whisper in his mind, urging him to commit darker and darker deeds. Desperate for help, Jack returned to Eternal Ink, only to find the shop gone. The alley where it had been was now just a dead end, filled with trash and debris. Panic set in as he realized that no one he asked had ever heard of the shop. It was as if it had never existed. Determined to rid himself of the cursed tattoo, Jack sought out other tattoo artists, hoping someone could remove or cover it. But every time he tried, the tattoo would resist, causing him excruciating pain. One artist even claimed to see the beast move and refused to touch it, leaving Jack more hopeless than ever. Jack's life spiraled out of control. He lost his job, his friends distanced themselves, and he found himself increasingly isolated. The beastly tattoo consumed his every thought, its influence growing stronger. He could no longer distinguish his desires from its demands. One night, in a fit of desperation, Jack tried to cut the tattoo out of his skin, but the wound healed instantly, leaving the beast unscathed. Realizing he needed to confront the source, Jack delved into research about ancient tattoos and curses. He found legends of tattoos that were not just ink, but living entities, binding themselves to their hosts and feeding off their energy. These tattoos were created by dark practitioners who sold them to unsuspecting victims. Jack's search led him to an old, reclusive occultist named Lydia. She lived in a decrepit house filled with ancient books and artifacts. When he showed her the tattoo, she recoiled in horror. "This is no ordinary tattoo," she said. "It's a manifestation of a demon. It feeds on your fear and anger, growing stronger with each dark deed it compels you to commit." Lydia explained that to rid himself of the tattoo, Jack would have to confront the demon within it and sever its connection to his soul. The ritual would be dangerous and could cost him his life. With no other options, Jack agreed to undergo the ritual. In a darkened room filled with candles and symbols, Lydia began the ritual. She chanted in an ancient language, drawing sigils around Jack. As the ritual progressed, the tattoo began to writhe and pulse, causing Jack unbearable pain. The beast seemed to come alive, its form rising from his skin as a shadowy entity. Jack was plunged into a nightmarish vision where he faced the demon, a monstrous being of darkness and malevolence. It taunted him, showing him all the evil it had forced him to commit. But Jack, fueled by his desire to be free, fought back. He focused all his will on rejecting the demon, casting it out of his mind and body. With a final, blood-curdling scream, the demon was banished. Jack collapsed, exhausted but free. The tattoo, now a lifeless mark on his skin, no longer had power over him. Lydia warned him that the demon might seek revenge, but Jack was prepared to face whatever came next. He left Lydia's house feeling lighter than he had in months. The darkness that had plagued him was gone, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. Jack knew he would never be the same, but he had reclaimed his life and his soul. As he walked home, he passed the alley where Eternal Ink had once stood. It was still just a dead end, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something watched him from the shadows. He glanced back one last time and saw a pair of glowing green eyes staring at him before vanishing into the night. Jack knew he had won this battle, but the war against darkness was never truly over. He would always carry the scar of his encounter with the cursed tattoo, a reminder of the price of dabbling in forbidden arts. But as long as he remained vigilant, he vowed never to let the darkness control him again. And so, with the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds, Jack walked away, ready to face whatever new challenges lay ahead. The cursed tattoo had been a harrowing ordeal, but it had also given him a strength he never knew he possessed. He was no longer the same man who had walked into that mysterious shop on a rainy evening, and for that, he was grateful. The Good Child. In the small, fog-covered town of Ravensbrook, there lived twin brothers, Adam and Ethan. Born on a night when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, their arrival was shrouded in mystery and whispered rumors of a dark prophecy. Adam, with his kind heart and gentle nature, was adored by all who knew him. Ethan, however, harbored a darkness within, a malevolent streak that troubled those around him. As the boys grew, their differences became more pronounced. Adam spent his days helping the townsfolk, his smile a beacon of light. Ethan, on the other hand, reveled in causing mischief, his actions becoming more sinister as he aged. The townspeople often warned their children to steer clear of Ethan, fearing his dark influence. One cold autumn day, when the brothers were 14, they ventured to the old, abandoned mill on the outskirts of town. The mill, with its creaking beams and eerie silence, was a place of legend and fear. Some said it was haunted, and others claimed it was cursed. Adam felt uneasy as they approached, but Ethan was drawn to the mill's darkness like a moth to a flame. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of decay lingered. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they explored, the only sounds their footsteps and the distant cawing of crows. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the mill, and Ethan, in his reckless manner, climbed to the upper level, daring Adam to follow. "Come on, Adam! Don't be such a coward!" Ethan taunted, his voice echoing off the walls. Adam hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched as Ethan teetered dangerously close to the edge of the platform. A sense of dread filled Adam, but before he could call out, Ethan lost his footing. Time seemed to slow as Ethan plummeted to the ground below, his scream piercing the air. Adam rushed to his side, but it was too late. Ethan lay lifeless, his eyes staring blankly into the void. The town mourned Ethan's death, though whispers of relief mingled with sorrow. Adam was inconsolable, guilt gnawing at his soul. He felt responsible, believing he could have prevented the tragedy. Nights became sleepless, and shadows seemed to whisper his name. It was on a particularly dark night, when the wind howled and the trees outside his window scratched like skeletal fingers, that Adam first sensed Ethan's presence. A chill crept through his room, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shapes on the walls. Adam shivered, pulling the covers tighter around himself. "Adam!" A voice whispered, barely audible, but unmistakably Ethan's. Adam's heart raced as he looked around the room, his breath visible in the cold air. "Ethan," he called out, his voice trembling. "I'm here, Adam. I've come back." The figure of Ethan materialized before him, pale and translucent, his eyes filled with a cold malice. Adam gasped, fear paralyzing him. Ethan's spirit was not the brother he remembered. This Ethan was twisted, consumed by a darkness that made Adam's blood run cold. "You let me die, Adam," Ethan hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "And now, I will make you pay." Adam tried to reason with the apparition, but Ethan's rage was unyielding. Over the following weeks, strange occurrences plagued the town. Accidents, misfortunes, and eerie sightings became commonplace. The townspeople grew suspicious, and rumors began to spread. One evening, as the sun set and the sky bled into darkness, Adam attended a town meeting. The villagers were agitated, their fear palpable. They spoke of a malevolent presence, a spirit bent on causing harm. Eyes turned to Adam, whispers growing louder. "It's him," a woman cried out, pointing a trembling finger at Adam. "The spirit of his brother haunts us because of him." "No, it's not true," Adam pleaded, but his words fell on deaf ears. Ethan's spirit was relentless, appearing to the townsfolk and sowing seeds of doubt and fear. He whispered lies in their ears, convincing them that Adam was the true evil, that he had orchestrated Ethan's death. The town, gripped by terror, turned against Adam. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder rumbled ominously, a mob gathered outside Adam's home. Torches flickered in the wind, casting a fiery glow on their angry faces. Adam barricaded himself inside, but the angry shouts and pounding on the door were relentless. "Come out, Adam," they demanded. "Face your judgment." Desperate, Adam tried to explain, to make them see reason, but Ethan's spirit loomed over him, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "They'll never believe you," Ethan taunted. "They only see what I want them to see." The door splintered, and the mob surged inside. Adam was dragged into the street, the rain pouring down in torrents. Lightning illuminated the scene, casting stark shadows on the faces twisted with rage and fear. They threw him to the ground, their voices a cacophony of accusations. "Burn the witch," someone shouted. "No, please," Adam begged, but his cries were drowned out by the roaring storm and the fury of the crowd. As the flames rose around him, Ethan's spirit watched, his laughter a haunting echo. Adam's eyes met his brother's, a silent plea for mercy. But Ethan's heart was as cold as the grave, his soul lost to the darkness. The fire consumed Adam, and the town watched in silence as the flames died down, leaving only ashes. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased, but the town of Ravensbrook was forever changed. The memory of the twins lingered, a chilling reminder of the thin line between light and darkness. Years passed, and the story of Adam and Ethan became a ghostly legend, told to frighten children into behaving. But those who lived through the terror knew the truth. They had seen the evil that lurked behind innocent eyes, and they knew that sometimes, the dead do not rest peacefully. One quiet night, long after the events had faded into memory, a lone figure stood by the ruins of the old mill. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint sound of laughter. The figure, cloaked in shadow, watched the moon rise, a sinister smile on his lips. "Hello, brother," Ethan's spirit whispered to the night. "It's good to be home." In the town of Ravensbrook, the legend of the twin brothers lived on, a haunting tale of love, betrayal, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. And in the shadows, Ethan's spirit waited, ever watchful, ever vengeful, a dark reminder that some spirits can never be laid to rest. The new love. After the bitter end of his 7-year marriage, Michael found himself adrift in a sea of loneliness. In his early 30s and newly divorced, he decided to take a leap into the world of online dating. It wasn't long before he met Lily, a woman whose profile seemed almost too good to be true. Her pictures were stunning, and her interests matched his own: hiking, cooking, and a love for classic literature. Their initial chats were engaging, filled with laughter and shared stories. Michael felt a spark he hadn't experienced in years. Their first date took place at a quaint cafe in the heart of the city. Lily was even more beautiful in person, her green eyes sparkling with intelligence and humor. They spent hours talking, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Michael was smitten. He couldn't believe his luck in finding someone so perfect. Over the next few weeks, their relationship blossomed. Lily was attentive and affectionate, always knowing just what to say to make Michael feel special. She cooked him elaborate dinners, leaving him amazed at her culinary skills. They went on adventurous hikes, shared their favorite books, and spent long evenings cuddling on the couch. Michael's friends noticed the change in him, seeing a happiness that had been missing for a long time. But as time went on, subtle cracks began to appear in Lily's perfect facade. It started with small things, her temper flaring over trivial matters, a possessive tone when he mentioned spending time with friends. Michael dismissed these incidents as minor quirks, convinced that everyone had their flaws. One evening, after a particularly intense argument over a misplaced book, Lily's demeanor shifted dramatically. She apologized profusely, tears streaming down her face, and begged for forgiveness. Michael, taken aback by the intensity of her emotions, reassured her that everything was fine. But the unease lingered. As the weeks turned into months, Lily's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She began to show up unannounced at Michael's workplace, bringing lunch, but also a palpable tension. His colleagues noticed, their concerned glances becoming more frequent. Lily's texts and calls became incessant, her need for constant reassurance suffocating. One night, Michael came home to find Lily waiting on his doorstep, her eyes wild with anger. "Who were you with?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Michael tried to explain that he had been out with friends, but Lily's rage was uncontrollable. She accused him of lying, of cheating, her words cutting deep. After she stormed out, Michael sat in silence, his mind reeling. He knew something was seriously wrong, but couldn't bring himself to end things. He still held onto the memory of the woman he had first met, hoping she would return. The following weeks were a nightmare. Lily's outbursts became more violent, her jealousy morphing into obsession. She hacked into his social media accounts, sending accusatory messages to his friends and colleagues. She began to isolate him, demanding that he cut ties with anyone she deemed a threat to their relationship. One evening, Michael discovered that Lily had installed a tracking app on his phone. He confronted her, but her reaction was terrifying. Her face twisted with fury, and she screamed at him, throwing things across the room. Michael was genuinely afraid for his safety. That night, after Lily finally left, Michael changed the locks on his doors and blocked her number. But the respite was short-lived. The next morning, he found a note on his car, written in a shaky hand, "You can't escape me." Panic set in as Michael realized the extent of Lily's obsession. He contacted the police, but without concrete evidence of physical harm, they could do little more than file a report. Michael felt trapped, his life spiraling into a terrifying game of cat and mouse. Lily's harassment escalated. She sent threatening emails, made anonymous calls at all hours, and even vandalized his property. Michael barely slept, his nerves frayed. He began to see her everywhere, in the shadows, lurking behind corners. His friends urged him to move away, to start fresh somewhere else, but Michael was paralyzed by fear. One night, Michael woke to the sound of breaking glass. His heart pounding, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911, whispering his address to the operator. As he crept downstairs, he found Lily in the living room, her eyes glinting with madness. She held a shard of glass in her hand, her expression a twisted mask of love and rage. "You can't leave me, Michael," she whispered, stepping closer. "We're meant to be together." Just as Lily raised the glass, the police burst in, tackling her to the ground. Michael watched in shock as they handcuffed her, her screams echoing through the house. Relief washed over him, but the terror lingered, the image of her wild eyes burned into his memory. In the aftermath, Michael learned the full extent of Lily's instability. She had a history of obsessive behavior and violence, with restraining orders from past relationships. Her charm and beauty masked a deeply disturbed mind. The police assured him she would be held accountable, but the emotional scars remained. Michael moved to a new city, hoping to rebuild his life. He changed his phone number, his email, and deleted his social media accounts. The experience left him wary, his trust shattered. He attended therapy, slowly piecing together his shattered self-esteem. Months passed, and Michael began to heal. He made new friends, found joy in hobbies, and started dating again, albeit cautiously. The memory of Lily was a constant shadow, a reminder of how easily charm can disguise darkness. He was determined not to let fear control him, but he remained vigilant, always aware of the potential for hidden danger. One evening, as he walked home from a date, Michael's phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number: "I'll find you." His blood ran cold. The nightmare wasn't over. He looked around, the shadows seeming to close in. Michael knew he couldn't let fear consume him, but the terror of Lily's unhinged obsession was a specter that would haunt him forever. Blackened Soul. In the gritty underground scene of New York City, the heavy metal band Blackened Soul was on the verge of breaking through. The band had it all: bone-crushing riffs, thunderous drums, and a stage presence that electrified their fans. But they had one problem: their lead singer, Derek. Despite his talent, Derek's erratic behavior and frequent outbursts were becoming a liability. The tension reached a breaking point during a rehearsal when Derek stormed out, leaving the band in disarray. The remaining members, Eddie on guitar, Mike on bass, and Tony on drums, looked at each other with a mix of frustration and determination. They knew they had to make a change if they were ever going to achieve their dreams. That night, in the dimly lit back room of their favorite bar, the three bandmates hatched a sinister plan. Eddie voiced what they were all thinking, but were too afraid to say. "Derek is holding us back. We need to get rid of him, for good." Mike and Tony exchanged uneasy glances, but ultimately nodded in agreement. They knew what they were about to do was wrong, but the lure of fame and success was too strong. Over the next few days, they meticulously planned Derek's demise, ensuring every detail was covered. One stormy night, they lured Derek to an abandoned warehouse under the pretense of discussing the band's future. The rain poured down, masking the sinister atmosphere that hung in the air. Derek arrived, his face a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Before he could react, the band jumped him, their actions swift and brutal. Derek fought back, his screams echoing through the empty warehouse, but he was outnumbered and overpowered. With one final, desperate plea, Derek's life was extinguished. The band stood over his lifeless body, their faces pale and their hands trembling. They buried him in a shallow grave in a remote forest, believing their dark secret was safe forever. The next day, they wasted no time in finding a new singer. Alex, a charismatic frontman with a voice that could shatter glass, joined the band. The energy and chemistry were immediate. Blackened Soul was reborn, and their ascent to fame began. Their first gig with Alex was a huge success. The crowd roared with approval, and the band felt an exhilaration they hadn't experienced in years. But as the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, a chilling wind swept through the venue, sending shivers down their spines. The air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, and a sense of unease settled over them. That night, Eddie couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, haunted by the memory of Derek's last moments. Just as he drifted into a fitful sleep, he heard a whisper, a low, raspy voice that seemed to come from the shadows. "You can't escape me, Eddie." Eddie bolted upright, drenched in sweat. He looked around, but his room was empty. Dismissing it as a nightmare, he tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling of being watched lingered. In the following days, strange occurrences plagued the band. Equipment malfunctioned inexplicably, instruments went missing, and eerie noises echoed through their practice space. Alex, unaware of the band's dark secret, grew increasingly frustrated. During a late-night rehearsal, the power suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. A cold wind swept through the space, and a ghostly figure appeared in the corner. Derek's spectral form, his eyes burning with fury, stepped forward. "You thought you could get rid of me," he hissed, his voice a chilling echo. "You're going to pay for what you did." Panic ensued as the band members stumbled in the dark, desperately trying to escape. But Derek's spirit was relentless, his presence growing stronger with each passing moment. Lights flickered back on, revealing Derek standing inches from Eddie, his face twisted in a vengeful snarl. Eddie screamed, his mind unraveling at the sight. Derek lunged, his ghostly hands wrapping around Eddie's throat. As Eddie gasped for air, the room filled with the sound of Derek's sinister laughter. The other band members tried to intervene, but an invisible force threw them back, pinning them against the walls. "Feel my pain," Derek whispered, his grip tightening. Eddie's vision blurred, darkness closing in. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, Derek released him, letting him collapse to the floor, gasping for breath. The band fled the rehearsal space, their minds reeling with fear. They knew they had to find a way to appease Derek's spirit or face a fate worse than death. Desperation led them to seek the help of a local medium, an eccentric woman named Madame Zara. Madame Zara listened intently as they recounted their tale, her face growing grim. "You've disturbed the balance between life and death," she said. "Derek's spirit is bound to this world by your betrayal. To lay him to rest, you must confess your sins and seek his forgiveness." Reluctantly, the band agreed. That night, they returned to the warehouse where it all began, hoping to summon Derek's spirit and beg for mercy. Madame Zara performed a ritual, chanting ancient incantations and burning sage to cleanse the space. Derek's ghost appeared, his presence more terrifying than ever. "You think I'll forgive you," he snarled. "You took my life, my dreams. Now, you'll suffer." Eddie stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Derek, we were wrong. We let our ambition blind us. Please, forgive us. Let us make amends." Derek's expression softened slightly, but his anger was still palpable. "You'll never truly understand the pain you caused me. But perhaps, there's a way to atone." He demanded they disband Blackened Soul and dedicate their lives to helping others, using their music to heal instead of harm. Reluctantly, they agreed, knowing they had no other choice. Over the following months, they dissolved the band and began volunteering at community centers and hospitals, playing music to lift the spirits of those in need. The hauntings ceased, but the memory of Derek's wrath never faded. Years passed, and the former band members found a sense of peace in their new lives. They knew they could never undo the past, but they hoped their efforts would honor Derek's memory and bring him the rest he deserved. Yet, every now and then, in the stillness of the night, they could feel a cold breeze and hear a faint whisper, reminding them of the darkness that lurks in ambition unchecked and the eternal consequences of betrayal. The Possessed Pet. In the small, quiet town of Brooksville, the Johnson family was known for their love of animals. Their home was always filled with the sounds of playful barks and the pitter-patter of paws. When their beloved dog Max passed away, the family was devastated. To fill the void, they decided to adopt a new pet. Little did they know, this decision would change their lives forever. One sunny afternoon, Emily Johnson, the youngest daughter, spotted a pet adoption van in the town square. Excited, she pulled her mother, Susan, towards it. Among the cages of kittens and puppies was a small, scruffy black cat with piercing green eyes. Emily felt an instant connection and begged her mother to adopt it. Susan, seeing how much Emily had missed Max, agreed. They named the cat Midnight and brought it home. From the very first night, strange things began to happen. Midnight would sit in the corner of Emily's room, staring intently at her with those unsettling green eyes. Emily often woke up in the middle of the night, feeling like she was being watched. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and the air grew cold whenever Midnight was near. At first, the family dismissed these occurrences as mere coincidences. But as days turned into weeks, the strange incidents escalated. Susan started finding dead birds and small animals outside their door, their lifeless bodies arranged in disturbing patterns. She tried to keep Midnight indoors, but the cat always found a way out, only to return with more gruesome gifts. One night, as Susan was preparing dinner, she heard a soft whispering coming from the living room. She crept closer and saw Emily talking to Midnight. Her daughter's voice was low and monotone, and she seemed to be in a trance. Susan called out to Emily, snapping her out of it. Emily looked confused, not remembering what she had been doing. Terrified, Susan decided to keep a closer eye on Midnight. She started noticing that the cat's eyes glowed brighter at night, and its fur seemed to move like it was alive. Susan confided in her husband, Tom, who brushed off her concerns, attributing them to stress. But soon, even Tom couldn't ignore the signs. He woke up one night to find Midnight sitting on his chest, staring down at him. He tried to push the cat off, but it felt unnaturally heavy. As he struggled, he heard a low growl emanating from the cat. Finally, Midnight jumped off and disappeared into the darkness. The next day, Tom and Susan decided to take Midnight to the vet, hoping to find a rational explanation for the cat's behavior. The vet, Dr. Harris, was puzzled. Midnight seemed perfectly healthy, but there was something about the cat that made him uneasy. He advised the Johnsons to keep an eye on it and to bring it back if the strange behavior continued. Back home, the situation grew worse. Emily began to act out, having violent outbursts and speaking in a language no one could understand. She insisted that Midnight was her friend and that the cat spoke to her. The family grew increasingly scared and desperate. One evening, Susan decided to do some research. She discovered that their house was built on land that once belonged to a woman accused of witchcraft in the 17th century. The woman, named Abigail, had been executed after a black cat was found at the site of a fire that had killed several townspeople. Rumor had it that Abigail's spirit had possessed the cat and cursed anyone who took it in. Realizing the gravity of their situation, Susan contacted a local paranormal investigator, Marcus Reed. Marcus arrived the next day with his equipment, ready to uncover the truth about Midnight. As soon as he stepped into the house, he felt an oppressive energy. He set up cameras and audio recorders around the house, focusing on Emily's room where the cat spent most of its time. That night, Marcus stayed with the Johnsons, monitoring the equipment. Around midnight, the house grew unnaturally cold, and the cameras picked up strange, shadowy figures moving through the halls. The audio recorders captured whispers in a language no one could understand. Suddenly, a loud crash came from Emily's room. Rushing upstairs, they found Emily levitating above her bed, her eyes rolled back and her mouth moving in silent incantations. Midnight sat at the foot of the bed, its eyes glowing fiercely. Marcus began chanting a prayer, and the room shook violently. Midnight let out an ear-piercing screech and lunged at Marcus, but he held his ground, continuing the chant. As the prayer intensified, Midnight's form began to shift and contort. The cat's body twisted grotesquely, and a dark, shadowy figure emerged from it, wailing in fury. With a final, thunderous roar, the shadow disintegrated, leaving Midnight lifeless on the floor. Emily fell back onto her bed, unconscious but unharmed. The oppressive energy lifted, and the house returned to normal. Marcus explained that Abigail's spirit had been using Midnight as a vessel to exact revenge on the living. The curse was now broken, but the family would never forget the terror they endured. In the days that followed, Emily recovered, and the family tried to move on. They buried Midnight in the backyard, hoping to finally put the ordeal behind them. But every so often, they would hear faint whispers at night and see flickers of shadows in the corners of their eyes. The Johnsons decided to move, leaving the haunted memories behind. Their new home was peaceful, and for a while, they thought they had escaped the horrors. However, one evening, Emily found a small, scruffy black cat sitting on their doorstep. Its piercing green eyes bore into hers, and she felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Terrified, she called out to her parents. They hurried to the door, only to find the cat gone, leaving no trace. Though they never saw it again, the Johnsons knew that the past was never truly behind them. The curse had left its mark, a reminder that some spirits are never at rest, and the darkness can find its way back, even when you think you're safe. Years later, Emily grew up and moved away, starting a family of her own. But she never forgot midnight and the terror that haunted her childhood. She kept a watchful eye on her own children, wary of any strange occurrences. One stormy night, she heard a soft scratching at her door. With a sinking feeling, she opened it to find a small, black cat with glowing green eyes staring up at her. She shut the door quickly, her heart pounding. The cat was gone when she looked again, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the darkness returned. As she tucked her children into bed that night, she whispered a silent prayer, hoping to protect them from the vengeful spirit that had once haunted her family. But in the shadows, the green eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. The curse of Abigail and her possessed pet was far from over, and the Johnson family would never truly escape its grasp. The Locket. Margaret had lived in the small, weather-beaten house at the edge of town for as long as anyone could remember. She was a kind, gentle woman who spent her days tending to her garden and feeding the birds that frequented her yard. She had a warm smile that lit up her face, but behind her gentle exterior was a life of deep sorrow. Her husband, Charles, had died tragically in an accident many years ago, leaving her with nothing but memories and a small gold locket he had given her on their wedding day. She wore the locket every day, cherishing it as a tangible piece of him. As Margaret grew older, her health began to decline. She knew her time was coming and made her wishes clear to her closest friend, Helen. "Make sure I'm buried with the locket, Helen," she said, her voice weak but determined. Helen promised she would, not knowing that this simple request would lead to a series of terrifying events. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep one chilly autumn night. The town mourned her loss, remembering her kindness and the love she had shown to everyone. Helen took it upon herself to organize Margaret's belongings and set up an estate sale to ensure her home and possessions would find new owners who would appreciate them. In the chaos of organizing the sale, the locket was misplaced and ended up among the items being sold. On the day of the estate sale, people from all over town gathered, eager to find a piece of Margaret to remember her by. Among the crowd was a young woman named Emily, new to town and unaware of Margaret's story. She was drawn to the locket, feeling an inexplicable connection to it. She purchased it without a second thought, not realizing the significance it held. Helen, overwhelmed by the turnout and the sheer number of items to sort through, did not notice the locket's absence. The sale concluded, and Margaret was laid to rest in a simple but heartfelt ceremony, her friends and neighbors paying their final respects. Helen, thinking she had fulfilled her promise, felt a sense of peace. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of Margaret began to fade. Emily, now settled into her new home, wore the locket daily, finding comfort in its presence. One night, as the full moon cast an eerie glow over the town, something strange began to happen. In the cemetery, Margaret's grave stirred. The ground shifted, and a hand, frail and bony, emerged from the earth. Margaret's spirit, restless and enraged, clawed her way out of the grave. Her once gentle features were now twisted with anger. The betrayal she felt was palpable, fueling her determination to retrieve the locket. She moved through the night like a shadow, her presence sending chills down the spines of those who unknowingly crossed her path. Margaret's spirit was drawn to the locket, its connection to her husband guiding her like a beacon. Emily was at home, unaware of the horror unfolding. She sat in her living room, the locket resting against her chest, its warmth comforting. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and the lights flickered. Emily felt a presence, a sense of dread that made her heart race. She stood, looking around, trying to shake off the feeling. Then she heard it, a soft, raspy whisper, calling her name. "Emily!" She turned, her eyes wide with fear. Standing in the doorway was the ghostly figure of Margaret. Her eyes, once kind, were now filled with anger. Emily froze, unable to move or speak. Margaret's spirit moved closer, her bony fingers reaching out. "You have something of mine," Margaret's voice was a chilling whisper. "Give it back." Emily clutched the locket, her heart pounding. I didn't know, she stammered, tears streaming down her face. Margaret's spirit did not care for explanations. She reached for the locket, her touch icy and unyielding. Emily felt a force stronger than anything she had ever known, compelling her to release the locket. With trembling hands, she unclasped it and held it out. Margaret took the locket, her expression softening slightly as she held the precious keepsake. The connection to her husband was restored, and the rage that had fueled her dissipated. Without another word, Margaret's spirit turned and began to move away, leaving Emily trembling in fear and relief. The journey back to the grave was slow, but steady. Margaret's spirit, now at peace, made her way back to her final resting place. As she approached her grave, the ground seemed to welcome her back. She lay down, clutching the locket to her chest, and the earth closed around her, sealing her in a comforting embrace. The town soon returned to its usual quiet routine, the events of that night fading into whispers and rumors. Emily, though forever marked by the encounter, found a way to move on, always remembering the lesson she had learned about respecting the wishes of the dead. Helen, upon hearing what had happened, was filled with a deep sense of regret. She visited Margaret's grave, apologizing for her oversight and vowing to ensure that such a mistake would never happen again. She planted flowers around the grave, a small but heartfelt gesture to honor her friend. Years passed, and the story of Margaret and her locket became a ghostly legend in the town. People would sometimes visit the cemetery on full moon nights, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old woman's spirit, still clutching her precious locket. Some claimed they saw her, while others dismissed it as mere superstition. But those who knew the true story understood the power of love and the lengths to which a soul would go to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Margaret's spirit rested peacefully now, her heart reunited with the locket that symbolized the enduring bond between her and her beloved Charles. And so, the small town continued to live in quiet harmony, the memory of Margaret a reminder of the importance of honoring the wishes of those who have passed. The old woman's story became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of what can happen when the dead are not allowed to rest in peace.